Hey guys, Sandro here from Carcraft Auto Detailing in Melbourne. Today's video is part 3 of the step-by-step 3-stage correction and protection detail on this Giulietta QV. In the last episode, I went through the 3-stage decontamination process to prepare the car for correction. In this part, I'll be going through the protective taping up of panels and trims and doing some glass and plastic trim, polishing and rejuvenation. First off, I'm going to start by giving the whole car an alcohol base wipe down using CARPRO's eraser and their two-face lint-free towel. The thing is, as I went through the stages of washing, iron and tar removal and claying, there's sure to be at least a little residue left on the surface from those stages even after rinsing. And as I've mentioned numerous times, I want this exterior as bare as possible before I get to restoring it, as anything that lies between my polisher and the paint or other trims is going to slow down and negatively affect my process. Eraser is more or less an IPA, so it's used as the final wipe down for the fact that it's a great alcohol-based cleaner that leaves no residue behind and is self-evaporating for the most part. I'll prime my microfiber cloth before starting and then go over the whole car a panel section at a time, giving each area a couple of sprays using the damp side of the cloth for the initial wipe down, and then flipping the cloth for the final wipe. Folded twice, you have 8 sections on your cloth, so after each quarter of the car is done, I'll use 2 new areas of the cloth for the first and final wipe. But don't just spray it on, wipe it off and move on. Check the paint and trims both visually and with touch as you go. Although some would have you believe it, nobody is perfect, so if you have missed something in the decontamination stage, use this final wipe down to check your work and address any issues that could potentially bring the correction stage to a halt. So I want to go through more specifically why I actually tape up the car's trims and panels before correcting. There are 2 things I'm trying to protect by taping up the trims and edges. Firstly is the paint from being scuffed by the edge of the machine's backing plate or pad when I'm correcting opposing and adjoining panels. And second is that I'm protecting the pad from picking up residue from certain trims, mostly rubber, that'll gunk up the pad, slow my progress and potentially reintroduce scratches to the finish. I also want to note that how I go about taping the car is directly related to both the specific unique trims and panels each car has, as well as the level of correction I'm performing and the machine, pads and products I'm using. Generally, if I'm doing a 1-stage polish with a dual action machine, I won't mask nearly as much as I would in comparison to doing a multi-stage correction that is using both rotary and DA machines. The reason being that the sharp panel creases and edges are areas that something like a rotary with a cutting pad and compound can burn through quickly, whereas a DA machine with a polish and finishing pad are not going to cause those issues, just as an example. Another thing to note is the tape itself. The red CARPRO tape is actually one of the best I've tried. That bonds well, comes off easily, doesn't have an abundance of residue that can cause issue, and conforms well to moulding around edges. But unfortunately I'd run out and wasn't able to get some in time for this video. Another great one is the yellow KAMIKAZE tape that does everything the CARPRO tape does, but just costs a little more and always seems to be out of stock, at least in my neck of the woods. Apart from that, the green and blue 3M tapes are pretty good as well, especially for the fact that you can pick them up almost anywhere and they come in many sizes. But overall, I do like the CARPRO and KAMIKAZE tapes a little more from a user point of view. And just a word of caution when using some no-name or cheaper brand masking tapes. You can have issues of poor bonding, excess residue, and some can prove near impossible to remove, so just be aware. If you've seen a few of my videos, you'll know that I almost work from the top to the bottom of a vehicle, so that 1, I'm not fighting gravity, 2, it gives me consistency in my workflow, and 3, for correcting the paint, you don't want to correct a lower panel and then have to lean over it to correct the roof. As you can see, this car has a glass roof, so I've decided to do all of the glass first, and most of the plastic trims are on the top half of the vehicle, so they'll be done before the paint as well. Like I've said before, every car is different, and every job is likewise, so it's important to stop, think and assess the situation in relation to what the best plan of attack is for you on that particular car for this particular job. Being a more involved 3-stage correction, I'm going to do what I can to get the glass and plastic trims looking as good as possible. So the first stage of protective masking is being placed to protect the paint and trims surrounding the glass as well as the machine pads from those surrounding rubbers. As far as taping technique goes, you need to be conscious of the tape's edges, as that is where you can encounter issues of picking up the tape's adhesive residue on your machine's pad and transferring it on the surface you're working on, causing real headaches. So always do your best to roll the tape edges into the panel and trim's edges so that you're only making contact with the tape's midsection. Use your fingers to slide along the tape and fasten it securely, and make sure the ripped edges are secured and folded out of the way. Another thing is accessibility. Throughout the correction, you're gonna need to open and close the doors to gain better access to certain areas. So don't make the rookie mistake of taping the doors, hatch or bonnet shut, as you will be retaping those sections. And lastly, just stop and consider your workflow. As I said, I'm doing the glass and panel trims firstly, so my initial masking will be dictated by that plan. I'll just note that my camera had serious issues focusing on the roof glass, but hopefully you can see that the main defects on that area as well as the whole vehicle's glass is water spotting. But as we move on, I'll have some better footage that better shows these defects, especially on the windshield. I'll also note that I did try CARPRO's spotless water spot remover to treat those defects, but with little success as the majority of them appear to have been there quite a while. Glass is a very hard surface in comparison to paint, but it doesn't mean you should start with an aggressive polish such as CARPRO's Siri Glass or an aggressive pad such as their rayon pads. Water spots, just like any scratch or defect, can vary greatly. So no different to correcting the paint or detailing in general, always start with the least aggressive method and move up from there if you're not achieving the results you're after. For the glass, my starting point was CARPRO Reflect on the CARPRO polishing pad with my 3-inch S.M.A.T dual action polisher. I'm using a mid to fast machine speed with relatively slow arm movement and mid to light pressure, working about a half meter section at a time. The water spots are coming off, but it's taking 2 sets of passes to get there. The rear quarter left hand side of the roof glass, for some unknown reason, has more severe water spotting. That, after some testing, I settled on CARPRO Fixer with the CARPRO microfiber pad that showed great success in eliminating them. That section was then finished with Reflect and the polishing pad to create a uniform finish over the entire roof glass. I'm going to dive a little further into the importance of doing your test panel when choosing and trying to work out the best combination of pads, polishes and machine use to get the results you're trying to achieve when I actually get to correcting the paint. But for now, I want to talk a little about the importance of understanding the products themselves and how to get the most out of them. Having a theory-based understanding of specific products is an important first step. Not all polishes and compounds behave the same, so understanding their unique characteristics and chemistry is vital for getting the most out of them. Although there are a lot of varying ingredients that make up a compound or polish, one of the main things about them that determine how they work is their abrasives. There are two main types of these found in products today, which are firstly S.M.A.T abrasives, that stands for Super Micro Abrasive Technology. Basically, this means that the product's fine abrasives don't break down or diminish as you correct the paint. They'll stay true and consistent from start to finish as you polish. The second type of abrasive is DAT, which stands for Diminishing Abrasive Technology. These begin as larger abrasives, and as you continue to correct the paint, they will decrease in size to refine the finish. But I'll also add that some products can contain a combination of the two. As this is a follow-up video series to my CARPRO products review, I'm largely using their range. So for this detail, I'll be talking more about their products in particular, which for the most part use DAT-based chemistry. Although theoretically based knowledge is important, it's only one part of the equation. And as much as theory can assist you along the way, it's never going to replace the knowledge and skill that only practical hands-on experience will provide. Using and testing these products to discover both their limitations and strengths in the real world will vary greatly to their labelled and theoretical idealistic uses and results. This is largely why one person will use a certain polish and praise it for its brilliant ability, while another person will use the same product and condemn it as a poor quality polish. There are just too many variables that can't be summed up in any product's information or in any one video. But bit by bit, as you continue to have highs and lows through practical and varied experience, you'll begin to put that theoretical knowledge together with that practical experience to gain a more well-rounded base of knowledge and skills. But back to the CARPRO DAT compounds and polishes I'm using to remove the water spots from the glass. As I said, it's taking a couple of sets of passes to eliminate them, but rather than doing 2 sets of 4 passes for each section, I'm doing a first set with only 2 passes and a second set with 4. Why? Because it's achieving the results I'm after faster. Like I said, DAT polishes initially have larger abrasives that begin to break down as you work them. So the first row of each passes will have the most cut, while the second will slightly reduce its cut, and by the third and fourth passes, you're just really refining the finish. So my first set of passes is primarily about removing the water spots, while the second set is about further removing them and refining the finish. But let me reinforce that this is just one example of how this polish, pad and machine combination and technique is behaving on this particular surface in this particular environment. How these DAT abrasives break down is going to be determined by many factors such as pad choice, the surface you're working on, and your machine and technique. Which comes back to doing your testing, which, as I said, I'll get more into thoroughly when we get to correcting the paint. The other thing I want to touch on is machine selection. More or less, the larger the backing plate and pad you use will produce increased correcting ability regardless of whether you're using a DA machine or a rotary. So why then don't I use a 6-inch pad to correct the whole car? Because that larger size can't effectively correct the smaller edges and tighter panels. For the glass, in particular the door windows, a 5 or 6-inch pad just can't access any of the 4 corners of that panel, whereas a 3-inch pad can get much closer and is therefore more effective in that instance. Overall, a combination of smaller pads and machines to tackle the tighter edges and panels, together with larger pads and machines to more quickly correct the larger flatter surfaces, is a winning combination for me and many detailers alike. And although I could have used this combination for the glass, it wasn't worth switching machines and pads in this particular instance, as the smaller pad and DA used to do all the glass was a quicker, more effective choice. Finally, I hate backtracking in my work as it's both time consuming and frustrating. So my last stage with the glass, and most correction in general, is to do a final wipe down with a razor, checking each section as I go and making sure I haven't missed anything and the glass is where I want it to be. One material on cars that varies more so than any other is plastic. Certain plastic trims, such as this Alpha's roof water channels and other flat non-textured plastic, can actually respond very well to polishing. Just like the glass in the polishing step, I'm starting with the least aggressive method first, using Reflect and the CARPRO's polishing pad. And also, like the glass, water spots are the main defect as well. But unlike the glass, there is also some light oxidation that has this black plastic looking a little more charcoal in colour. Hopefully you can see that just one set of 4 passes is enough on this material to not only eliminate the watermarks, but also restore that true black to the trim's finish. However, with the twin plastic door pillars located by the B pillar, it's a different situation. This is a more textured plastic, and as you can see, there is quite a bit of wear, most likely from them being used to close the door rather than the door handles. I know from previous experience that I'm very limited as to what I can do with this sort of plastic, especially where the plastic's texture has been worn off. But generally I can at least improve on the overall finish. My initial passes with the polishing pad really aren't giving me any noticeable improvement. As I step up to the microfiber pad, still using reflect polish, it's enough to lessen those defects on the plastic without being too aggressive and removing the plastic's textured finish. And that's all I'm searching for, as going too far and hard with this sort of surface will kill its finish. And as I'm going to be coating all these plastics with C-Quartz Deluxe, I also know that it will further aid in restoring the plastic's finish as well as protecting them. Being an Alpha, this car has the trademark hidden rear door handles, with the same sort of plastic as the door pillars. The defects aren't nearly as bad as the driver's plastic pillar, but there are some less noticeable scratches within those rear handles cavities. As this sort of area is a little too tight and restrictive for machine use, a hand polish with a bit of elbow grease is enough to get them looking close to new. I'm just using CARPRO's short pile weave microfiber cloth with reflect, using a decent amount of pressure with a few minutes of work on each one. Overall, these metal look window trim plastics are generally one of the hardest plastics to restore. They usually have an outer wrap similar to PPF, paint protection film, so they are really difficult to restore without hazing the finish. As far as scratch removal goes, which as you can hopefully see there is quite a few, most likely from improper washing, it's best not to attempt it. But I have found that with a polish as opposed to a compound, you can bring a little clarity to the finish and reduce some of the lighter scratches. The best balance I've found that reduced some of the defects and brought back some clarity was doing a primary pass with a microfiber pad and then a final pass with a foam finishing pad. Both times using CARPRO reflect polish with a 1-inch pad on the RUPES IBRID in rotary mode at a mid-speed. Overall, I'd say it gave those trims a 20 to 30% improvement, which unfortunately is about as good as that plastic material will allow. The front triangular alpha grille is generally in good condition, which is great since it's an area that needs to be hand polished. Overall, there's a little build-up of grime around the edges and some light water spotting that I'm confident a light polish should rectify. I'm using a small micro suede CARPRO cloth to apply and work reflect, as it's a tight area and a smaller cloth is more maneuverable. Another thing to note about polishing areas such as these more intricate trims is that it's a great way to clean up the trims in a manner that washing just can't achieve. It is tedious work, but overall it's these little details that really make the final result stand out. I'm also using CARPRO Essence to give this grille a final jeweling polish and the first layer of protection. And as you can hopefully see, it's really starting to pop. I've found that if I'm coating certain plastics, like the black and clear ones I previously corrected, they tend to have bonding issues with the coating if they have Essence applied as a base coat. But for these smoother, tighter surface plastics and the car's lights, which are generally clear coated, Essence seems to be great without compromising the coating. These headlights have the unfortunate alpha trademark of letting moisture in, so some of the haze and spotting is actually on the inside, but most of the outer surface defects are swirls and some water spots. Due to the shape and curves of the headlights, I'm going to use my RUPES NANO with the large DA throw attachment and 2-inch pads to best tackle them. Overall, most headlights have quite a hard clear coat on them, and after a little testing, I found that the CARPRO microfiber pad with their fixer compound was the best first step to remove the majority of these defects. Like I said in part 1 of this series, I'm looking for 90 to 95% correction on this job, and I'm also trying to find the balance where I can remove the majority of the defects without having to remove too much clear coat. The difference with clear coat on headlights as opposed to paint is that if you burn through it, you can just remove the rest of it and then refine and protect the finish. Whereas with the 2-stage paint on the rest of the car, if you burn through it, it's really game over and off to the body shop. But that doesn't mean I want to remove the headlights clear coat for 100% perfection. I want to keep it for as long as possible, and living with 5 to 10% of defects to save it is a great compromise in my opinion. So after these 2 sets of passes with fixer and the microfiber pad, the vast majority of those scratches and water spots are gone, but there is some light hazing left over from the compounding stage. The great thing about fixer is that it generally finishes down quite well, so just 1 set of passes with CARPRO's Reflect is all that's needed to bring clarity to the finish. The final stage is just a quick jeweling with Essence that is going to further enhance the headlights and add the first stage of protection. The tail lights are pretty much done in the same fashion as the headlights, but due to the more intricate tighter curves, I'm going to use the 1-inch backing plate and pads to better access and correct those lights. After all the plastics have been attended to, I'm just going to give the twin exhaust tips a more thorough clean with P21's polishing soap before I give them a polish later on. If you haven't tried this product, I highly recommend it. You simply wet the applicator it comes with, or you can use your own, gather some of the product with it, then simply let the soap do the work as you wash the surface. This soap is really effective at dealing with more serious grime such as exhaust carbon, and the applicator rinses off very easily even with the toughest of grime. Well, that's it for part 3 of this series. This video did go a lot longer than I anticipated, but I wanted to cover all the trims in this episode so that in the next video I can get straight into the paint correction. I hope this video was useful for some of you out there. Please like, comment and subscribe to show your support. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.